revelation that Barack Obama and John Kerry sought a huge and enormous giveaway to Iran that violated U.S. sanctions. And they lied to Congress about it. They lied to Congress about it. We've given you the Associated Press's breaking story, an opinion piece from commentary, and some more in-depth reporting by the Washington Free Beacon, along with a deep understanding of progressive thinking, academic progressive thinking. And that is an admiration for all too powerful single-party governments. There's a reason why Elizabeth Warren looks lovingly at China, as does people like Anita Dunn. They think our government is inefficient because we are too free. If we can just end this experiment in self-government or limited government, or the freedom of decision-making for top-down rule, where the people produce and the government distributes, we would just be better off, because people like them know how life should be led. They know how you should be educated, how you should produce, how you should be treated in healthcare, retire, and ultimately die. And any disagreement with that is born of ignorance. You just don't realize how smart these people are. Chuck Schumer, and I'm going to try to get to calls here. He wrote in 2015, in making my decision, that is to oppose the Iran deal, I examined the deal in three parts. Nuclear restrictions on Iran in the first 10 years, nuclear restrictions on Iran after 10 years, and non-nuclear components and consequences of the deal. In each case, I've asked, are we better off with the agreement or without? In the first 10 years of the deal, there are serious weaknesses in the agreement. First, inspections are not anywhere, anytime. The 24-day delay before we can inspect is troubling. While inspectors would likely be able to detect radioactive isotopes at a site after 24 days, that delay would enable Iran to escape detection of any illicit building and improving of possible military dimensions. The tools that go into building a bomb but don't emit radioactivity. Furthermore, even when we can detect radioactivity at a site where Iran is illicitly advancing its bomb-making capacity, the 24-day delay would hinder our ability to determine precisely what was being done at the site. Even more troubling is the fact that the U.S. cannot demand inspections unilaterally by requiring the majority of the 8-member Joint Commission, and assuming that China, Russia, and Iran will not cooperate, inspections would require the votes of all 3 European members of the P5+1, as well as the EU representative. It's reasonable to fear that once the Europeans become entangled in lucrative economic relations with Iran, remember, the goal here was for Iran to be able to convert $6 billion or $6 billion in Omani currency into the U.S. financial system and then into euros, so they could do business with businesses of the European Union. He writes, Europeans become entangled in lucrative economic relations with Iran, they may be well inclined not to rock the boat by voting to allow inspections. This is Chuck Schumer. This is what Barack Obama and John Kerry were seeking to achieve. They wanted to make it so there could be no going back. The Iran deal was not designed to stop their nuclear program, because the failings are right there. If they were able to introduce trade, open trade with Europe, knowing that China, knowing that Russia would never be on our side in the future, there would be a financial incentive for the Europeans not to allow inspections. And since we couldn't demand them unilaterally, we would have to defer to the P5+1, to which we would lose in the voting process. This is Chuck Schumer. There was Obama and Kerry trying to give it away to advance Iran. Additionally, the snapback provisions in the agreement seem cumbersome and difficult to use. While the U.S. can unilaterally cause snapback of all sanctions, there would be instances, see now, even if they did, here, they undermine U.S. sanctions in this. They allowed the Iranians to enter the U.S. financial system while telling Congress that's not what they were doing. And it took us 2 years to find this out, making Donald Trump's view of the Iran deal the correct one. There would be instances where it would be more appropriate to snap back some but not all sanctions because the violation is significant but not severe. A partial snapback of multilateral sanctions can be difficult to obtain because the U.S. would require the cooperation of other nations. If the U.S. insists on snapback of all provisions, which it can do unilaterally, and the Europeans, Russians, or Chinese feel is too severe a punishment, they may not comply. Those who argue for the agreement say it's better to have an imperfect deal than to have nothing. Without the agreement, there would be no inspections, no snapback. When you consider only this portion of the deal, nuclear restrictions for the first 10 years, that line of thinking is plausible, but even for this part of the agreement, the weakness mentioned above makes the argument less compelling. Second, we must evaluate how this deal would restrict Iran's nuclear developments after 10 years. Supporters argue that after 10 years, a future president would be in no weaker position than we are today to prevent Iran from racing to the bomb. That argument discounts the current sanctions regime. After 15 years of relief from sanctions, Iran would be stronger financially and better able to advance a robust nuclear program. Absolutely! If they can free up their money and use dollars to convert to euros, and strike lucrative business deals, why would they come back to the table? And who would demand they come back to the table? Certainly not the Europeans, certainly not the Chinese, certainly not the Russians. This is what Barack Obama was doing in secret. And you want to talk about Stormy Daniels? You want to talk about the president's biggest problem is he can't watch porn otherwise? Who cares, Mika Brzezinski? This past president that every one of these pointy-headed little weenies were defending. Notice they're not talking about it. They want nothing to do with this story. Now, did you see what Trump tweeted about Mueller? Yes, I did. Now explain this. By every manner possible, Obama was undermining U.S. national security and Israel. And people like Chuck Schumer knew it. He opposed this deal with a laundry list of concerns that if I didn't tell you they were Chuck Schumer's, you'd say, that sounds like a conservative Republican right there. This is amazing. Even more importantly, the agreement would allow Iran, after 10 to 15 years, to be a nuclear threshold state with the blessing of the world community. Iran would have a green light to be as close, if not closer, to possessing a nuclear weapon than it is today, and the ability to thwart Iran on its intent of becoming a nuclear power would be less moral and economic force. If Iran's true intent is to get a nuclear weapon under this agreement, it must simply exercise patience. After 10 years, it can be very close to achieving that goal, and unlike the current unsanctioned pursuit of a nuclear weapon, Iran's nuclear program would be codified in an agreement signed by the United States and other nations. To me, after 10 years, if Iran is the same nation it is today, we'll be worse off with this agreement than without it. Then he writes, in addition, we must consider non-nuclear elements of the agreement. This aspect of the deal gives me the most pause. For years, Iran has used military force and terrorism to expand its influence in the Middle East. Really? $6 billion converted into other currencies would help them do that, actively supporting military and terrorist actions in Israel, Syria, Lebanon, Yemen, Iraq, and Gaza. That is why the U.S. has labeled Iran one of the only free nations in the world who are, quote, state sponsors of terrorism. Under this agreement, Iran would receive at least $50 billion in the near future and would undoubtedly use some of that money to redouble its efforts to create even more trouble in the Middle East and perhaps beyond. To reduce the pain of sanctions, the Supreme Leader had to lean left and bend to moderates in this country. It seems logical that to counterbalance, he will lean right and give the Iranian Revolutionary Guard and hardliners resources so they can pursue their number one goal, strengthening Iran's armed forces and pursuing even more harmful military and terrorist actions. Finally, the hardliners can use freed-up funds to build an ICBM as their own as soon as sanctions are lifted, and then augment their ICBM capabilities in 8 years after the ban on importing ballistic weaponry is lifted, threatening the United States. Restrictions should have been put in place limiting how Iran can use the new resources. This was a license to do what they wanted with the money. That's Barack Obama. That's John Kerry.